All right. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the third ever Enterpret Roundtable. I am extremely enthralled to be joined by two wonderful humans, Dina Mohammed Leti, who is the VP of Data at Field, and Adina Bauer, who is the head of memberships at the browser company, to join us for this very special roundtable discussion on disrupting mature categories through customer intelligence. Um, in the previous sessions we've talked to like leaders from Zoom, Notion, Figma of like how they've driven like product-led growth via customer intelligence. We've talked to John Cutler, the product savant, of his thoughts on leveraging customer intelligence. But I think this is like a very unique discussion because we get to see how customer feedback intelligence can play a role in disrupting very mature categories as well. And two shiny examples are Field, which is disrupting dating app category, which is like extremely competitive, and also Adina's company, the browser company, which has built an exceptional new browser called Arc, which is going viral by the day, which is disrupting a category dominated by multiple $1 trillion cap companies. To say the least. So super excited for the discussion. I think to get started, I would love to invite Adina and Dina to quickly introduce themselves. Maybe just share a little bit about the vision of your company, what your companies are trying to build, and what's your specific role within that company. Adina, maybe like we'll start with you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Adina. I lead membership at the browser company. The browser company is building a browser. It is what it sounds like. Our browser is called Arc. And we're hoping to build a browser that kind of meets internet users where they are today. So the browsers that were originally created look the same as they did 20 years ago, but our internet use has changed a lot. We work from home, we have life and work all mushed up together, our hobbies. And so how can we help make the browser kind of meet people in the headspaces they are at the right times and help them, multitask and reduce clicks online, and also just make it feel more like home. This is where you spend 10 hours of your day. So how can we also make the browser more fun and more comfortable while you're in it? Membership, we do customer support, user research, and user education for the members that join the browser company or join Arc.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Adina. And Dina, maybe with you, like if you could share like the vision for Field and what's your role there at the company.
Yeah, absolutely. And immediately after this, I'm going to go and download Arc. I'm really excited to give it a try. I'm sold. One more member. So yeah, Field, we started as a dating app that continues to be our main product offering. But in terms of like the vision as a whole is to create a world where everyone is more intimately connected to each other, but also to themselves. So as you say, it's trying to kind of disrupt the existing ways that we think about dating. For me and my role, my team's role in data, it's our responsibility to provide, access to consistent, reliable, and importantly useful data across the company to support different strategic decisions that get made across all different domains like product, marketing, growth. And I highlight useful data because I think our understanding of like what counts as data is changing, and certainly how we've all come here today, under the umbrella of what Enterpret is offering.
Yeah, great, wonderful. Thank you, Dina. I think to kick off the discussion, I'd love to like maybe just kick it off by understanding like how did your your respective companies create a wedge in such competitive spaces, right? Like so, and like what do you see as the opportunity for disruptions? Like what was the initial wedge and that allowed to for these like Field and the browser company to enter such competitive spaces? Considered mostly by many people to be just saturated and done and dusted for with no room for innovation. And like how did you even create a wedge in the first place? So like Adina, maybe you want to share like a few thoughts like of what made you want to like disrupt like the browser company to we're going to disrupt how browsers are built, which is I don't know, many people have thought about that before in the last few years at least.
Yeah. So I think when we first founded the browser company, which was about 3 years ago, one of the observations was that most of the tools we use are on the internet. So actually less important than your device now is just how you get online, just using the browser itself. You're using Notion, maybe you're using Slack, maybe you're using Enterpret, maybe you're using Salesforce. All of these are web apps. And so where we're spending most of our time is actually not on things you might be clicking on your dock, which is at the device level, but actually things that you are going on, opening Chrome, opening Safari, and plugging in a website. And so that was the original observation, but no one has innovated the browser and to kind of adopt it for that heavy use of web apps since the internet was first created. And so we kind of recognized that there was an opportunity to help empower people to use these apps to better to better match the way they use them, I guess, in the browser itself. Yeah. The other thing that's pretty exciting about right now, specifically just recently, is other browsers are starting to do innovative things. Actually, like a year ago or so, Safari launched a big relaunch. You now have ChatGPT in Edge. Brave, which is earlier, is now introducing privacy. So it is kind of, although you might look around and say, who needs a new browser? The browser market is actually evolving very quickly. And so new entrants are, I think it's the most exciting time in history for new entrants to come in because things are starting to shake up already.
Yeah, that's really exciting. And just to maybe double click, is the browser company taking a stance on like performance as the USP, or I know the user experience is something people really rave about, or is it like the end user experience and the design is the USP, or is it just like all in one? Would love to hear any thoughts of like how you view that.
Performance specifically. We think performance is a non-negotiable for any app that launches today. So we certainly care to advertise it to be the best in class, but we don't think it's why people are going to download Arc. But it is mandatory for any experience in software, and it is probably the biggest focus of our 2023 for our team. But it is not we're not saying download Arc, it's the fastest browser on the internet. We're saying download Arc, it's yours. It'll feel like home. It's kind of, we're not using that as our main tagline, but it's definitely essential.
Yeah, awesome. And then just the last question to complete the thought on browser. What's allowed it to grow super fast? We keep seeing, the founders sometimes share, also you take a very unique stance of being very public and transparent about a lot of the stats in the meetings, which is, I think, truly special about the browser company. But like, what's causing it to grow so fast? And like in the last few years, especially, it's been like shooting up. And some of the numbers, the growth numbers are just crazy, when you look at that.
Thank you. I think it's a combination of a couple things. One is we're not afraid to take risks. So our product design team is we're super excited to try out new experiments. We're honest with ourselves about if we think we like it, if we think it's going to make a big impact on our members. And then we also do talk to our members about what they want, which is another reason why Enterpret's fantastic. But learning from members, does this work for you? Not being too afraid to have things fail, and then kind of following up with that loop. We call it the learning engine, actually, where we ship a small experiment, learn about it, change the product over and over and over again. So I would say that, and just the relationship that we have, like the membership team really focuses on making sure people feel masterful on their products. And so, new technology can be scary. So making people feel like, no, there is a home for you in Arc, and making them feel like they can kind of build it out themselves. It almost feels more like they designed this. They're part of the creation of Arc and not just some user downloading a new product that seems kind of hard to use at first. So I know that's kind of ambiguous. Sometimes it's hard to define, like, I don't know the exact answer of like what caused Arc to click for a lot of people, but I would say it's kind of a combination of those things.
Got it. That's super helpful. And I think not being afraid to fail and taking a lot of like risks and getting early signals of feedback. I think those were the two like things that I extracted of like what's at a philosophical level, which is like, what's been helping drive the growth.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Adina, maybe turning on to you, Field is an extremely fascinating company. The origin story, obviously we can spend like a whole hour discussing that, but the growth trajectory has been amazing, especially in the last few years. It continues to just blaze through and create a space in such a mature and hyper competitive category as like dating. How do you think like that happened? Like, what any insights into that? Like, what's driving this disruption, and how did Field even create a wedge in here in such a competitive market?
Yeah, it's a wonderful environment to be working in, and super interesting too. I think largely driven by many of the societal changes that we're observing now and that are coming up on the horizon. we're able to transition from, we started out, and always will be a dating app. It's our main product offering, but transitioning to more like a community, like-minded people, where you have more of a variety of connections are formed between our various member groups. So to that extent, like community-led growth has been incredible for the company. And so in terms of like the disruption element there, it's a bit of a mindset shift, kind of culturally, how we talk about dating, how we think about dating, from this idea of like a destiny mindset to a growth mindset for you as an individual. Starting to rethink how we think about relationships with others and with ourselves. It's a consistently evolving structure that we shape together. So it's not something that's fixed, and this is something that, as a whole, I think society is shifting.
Got it. And then what's in the last few years, like the growth for field has been just absolutely explosive. Like any insights into like what's been causing that?
Again, I think like I said, it's the space that we've made to be a host to various different types of connections and people wishing to connect in different ways. Human relationships have evolved radically, not just over thousands of years. If you think about how people used to act 100 years ago or 50 years ago,
right?
Something that's always going to be moving, always going to be changing, and the kind of fluid values of the company, kind of trying to build what our users are wanting, what they need. That's been super vital to the growth of the business.
Yeah, awesome. That's great. And then I think coming back to now diving one step deeper, now we've established like the philosophies of both of your companies and what's causing them to grow at a hyper level. One of the things that's been fascinating for me to like observe, as I've gotten to know, both of you over the past several months, is like just like how deeply you're committed to just solving customer pain. It's just like at a deep level, and the unique vantage you put on that as like a data set. I would just love to understand like what made the realization as your companies were going through this hyper growth journey that, hey, whatever we're doing for customer feedback is not working and we need to deploy some sort of a way to aggregate and analyze customer feedback better. Like, was there like one particular moment, or like how did you get that conviction of spending more resources to solve this pain? Maybe Adina, like starting with you, and then I'd love to bring Dina in as well.
Sure. Yeah, so this has been one of the hardest parts actually of my career, not just at the browser company, is understanding what do people want and fixing things at the right time based on what people want, noticing when there's patterns. So the membership team at the browser company, we very seriously listen to user feedback, and we're very, very lucky to have a huge number for our user base size, a huge amount of inbound every week. And so we were doing this process of manually tagging, okay, this is a feature request about split view. This is a problem with whatever. And so manually tagging. But we also want to make sure that the team has this information kind of to have intuition about what our members are thinking. We need to aggregate it to talk about trends over time. So all of these issues of the membership team has a lot of intuition just from reading people's reports about what the biggest problems are. But it's very manual to tag them and communicate that and to give visibility to the rest of the team. And so people would ask us, what are the top 5 problems with split view? And we would go and find them through some very heavy process and try to also pull out examples. And it's very hard to kind of pass on the visibility that you have as a customer success person or as a user researcher onto the rest of the team. And so, we have all these really highly sophisticated tools for tracking objective data, like how many times do people use a feature, but we don't have very objective tools for tracking subjective feedback. What are the biggest 5 problems with this feature? And especially getting it to the product designers at the right time. I notice sometimes when I say a user has a piece of feedback about this, they're like, well, we're not working on that till next quarter. So why don't you remember to let us know about that problem in 6 months from now or something. They would never say that. They'd be very excited about our data. So I don't want to put that. But you also want to give them the information at the right time. So that's another element that makes our job very difficult. So I actually wasn't looking into the software until I was recommended the software by another product. Hey, you talk about this process being hard all the time. Why don't you try out Enterpret? And so it became very clear that it was the solution we were looking for, or just any solution to try to quantify the subjective parts of the job.
Right. Got it. And in terms of the pain at the browser company, was it like engineers, PMs, designers? Like how was the communication flow, and how often were you interacting with them previously when they would ask for examples?
Yeah, I would say it was fairly ad hoc. I think the culture of feedback is kind of sudden. We need to know right now what the 5 biggest problems in the app are. And so you're kind of like, hey, I have been collecting this over time, but give me a minute to kind of gather that so I can help inform your next sprint. The other thing is the membership team has a lot of really good intuition. And so we like to kind of involve ourselves in the process of speaking with engineers and designers as they're building things out, because while we believe data is super important, we also believe intuition is important. It's okay for someone who, looks at user feedback all day to be able to speak about what their opinion is. So we also just involve ourselves in sprints too. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. That's great. Yeah. And then Dina, about you, you said something fantastic you said at the beginning of our discussion was like, the nature of data is evolving. So, we don't typically see VPs of data who think about customer feedback as a data set, but, they're always worried about the product data, the logging data, the marketing data sets, like all the different data sets. How did you get conviction that, hey, we need to figure a way to solve this out? Like any insights into that?
Yeah, I think we start with the semantics, right? Because you have quantitative data and qualitative data. The clues in the name. They're both data.
Right. Yes.
But certainly oftentimes we focus on the former because, to be frank, it's easier, right? You get your analytics tool and you do your training, and actually it's counting things. As Adina said, it's counting things that are objective, number of clicks, how many people came through a funnel. And it's much like the lift is easier. The tooling nowadays is so advanced. Looking at tools like Amplitude, for example, where you can pull together insights that would take an individual a day to put together in a notebook, and they have to be quite decent with Python to get that far. These things, it's almost commoditized. And I've been really fortunate in the past to work with amazing product researchers, user researchers, where I've seen what happens when you bring that qualitative data and you merge it and synthesize it with the qualitative data. And it's a world where the whole is so much greater than the sum of the parts.
Right.
So having been exposed to that, when I was joined Field, I could see there's immense value coming from our customer experience team, who are receiving and speaking with users often about feedback, complaints, so on and so forth. And users are making the effort to directly tell us their pain points, but the customer experience team are having to spend quite a lot of time processing this, as you're saying, Adina, tagging, figuring out, building these hierarchies and so on. And that's not their core job, right? Their core job should be spend the time interfacing with the users to get more out, not doing taxonomy, building libraries. There's better ways for them to spend their amazing empathetic time. And because of that, it can be hard to see aggregate themes when you're doing this piecemeal. There's no overarching, say, kind of like taxonomy hierarchy on top. And if there is, it's very labor intensive to put that in place. Also, it's tough to see kind of themes that are connected. We can see something happening over here, a bug, but we don't know it's connected to this thing over here.
Right.
Kind of anecdotally, we believe that this might be happening, but it's almost impossible when you have this kind of manual solution to do it unless you have a huge team size, which we don't. So that was kind of the starting point. And then we launched our CSAT survey, which had an immense response rate. We asked people to give us the standard score, 1 to 5. And also we give a free text space where, what can we do better? And the response was unbelievable. I was blown away by how many of our members bothered to take their time to tell us what they needed. It wasn't all complaints, it was feature suggestions, improvements, optimization suggestions. And that really resonated with me, because I'm like, you're here to connect with other people, and you've bothered to connect with us. You've taken the time out of your day to connect with us and tell us how we can do better to serve you. So if they're taking the time to speak to us, I figured we should take the time and invest in hearing them. It's only fair, right? Those are the kind of 2 trigger points But another part was in terms of, and this just comes to your core data person space, but it was about access, like silo data sets.
Yes.
This feedback often sits in the CS team, in the CS tool. Only one group of people get to actually look at it very easily. Same with the CSAT data, we're sitting in the data warehouse. We can surface it in our BI tool, but the access there and the things you could do with it are limited. But putting it in the same place and making it that there is all this tooling and automation around it, making it available to everyone was one of the biggest things to me. Just to be able to send someone a link to Enterpret and be like, look, the data's in there, just go and have a look, search for some things, click some stuff. It's radical, right? So you can literally send the same link to an engineer as to a designer, to anyone. So yeah, I think breaking down those silos for customer feedback data is amazing.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I think the two things that stand out to me is like, I think for both the browser company and field, is like there's a sense of like community with your customer base. Is like they're part of our community, and like the amount of respect you show the feedback, or they bother to give us feedback, we really should respect that and take the time. So it's not like a hassle of always here's another support ticket. It's like, oh no, they have taken time to share feedback with us. We should really show respect to that. I think that's very progressive, forward looking, and I'm personally hopeful that philosophy is going to get like globally adopted in the next few years as the way to build disruptive companies. And the second thing that stands out, I think Dina, you mentioned, is like this concept of like access and like it's like, hey, like this, otherwise the data is just rotting away. Like I think most companies get more feedback than they know what to do with. It's just sitting in different systems, just sitting there, where like one team will look at that, and then so I think I love the concept of like giving the visibility to everyone who should have that. So I think that's fantastic. I think so. What has changed? Just changing a little bit of directions. Like what has changed in field and the browser company since this data access became more democratized, right? Basically, since like customer feedback insights were visible to everyone to act upon. Any changes you've noticed? Maybe Dina, will start with you this time. Anything you've seen has like changed since your vision to do this has transpired?
Yeah, I think the main thing, kind of to build off my earlier point, was just it's so much faster to synthesize the qualitative feedback into quantitative observations. You can start to pull together like different data points to understand like what you should prioritize and what you should actually work on. Because you need like both sides to be able to make that call. And then there's a bunch of things that we could be working on, but we need to understand what's going to have the biggest impact to our users. And maybe a good example is we made some recent improvements to our chat functionality. And that was largely because after seeing the feedback from CSAT, there was these themes that were coming through that previously hadn't been surfaced in the way that we were measuring feedback previously. But opening up this new channel and making that we can kind of process it and access and understand it really, really quickly, made it able to see, oh, actually, this is the biggest issue we need to solve right now. So let's go there. Let's solve the biggest user pain point first, because as I said, people are taking the time to tell us. Let's respect them by doing something about it.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Adina, like about you, like at the browser company, like since you're trying to bring objectivity into this like qualitative data set, like how is the process of how the membership team interacts with product team, engineering, and designers? Like how has that evolved since then?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think the point that Dina made about visibility has been one of the biggest things. Because I can say, hey, members are saying these 5 things. Like this is really what they think. But it's very different when you're able to show a report of all the things in the world people complain about. They complain about this thing the most objectively.
Yeah.
Like this is what's happening. The other thing that's really fantastic about it is, and I'm sure Dina can relate to this, but people describe their problems in a lot of different ways. Some people will say the app, the window, the, arc, those are all describing maybe the same problem or the same thing, or they'll say slow, laggy, and so to just search for the word slow is not good enough. And so one of the things that has been really spectacular is also being able to kind of aggregate words that are similar and say, okay, these are all related to the same problem. And one of the things we do, I'll give 2 examples that have come out of using Enterpret. One of the things we like to do is when a user suggests something, we call our users members, but to make it clear, when a user suggests something, we like to tell them when it's live in the app. And that has been a very difficult thing to do because the number of people who suggest things in different ways has been impossible to kind of say who asked for this feature. And so Enterpret kind of lets us kind of label people who've written in about certain problems differently, but quickly, and download that group and then send them a big message saying the feature you requested or the problem you had is solved, and be fairly confident that that person was talking about the problem that we actually fixed for them. So that's one issue. Another big thing was there was a bug in the app for a while, and anyone at the browser companies watching this, like, we had a full screen freeze problem. They'll know what I mean. And we didn't know how big of a problem it was until one of the fantastic members of my team posts a weekly report using Enterpret, and JM was like, nope, this is still the #1 problem. And leadership stopped everything. We reorganized our team to solve the problem and got it done in a couple of weeks. And hey, we solved the #1 problem in the app. It was a fixable bug. It was actually a tractable problem. We were very lucky that was the biggest problem. So yeah, I would say having the team kind of get bought into agreeing that something's the biggest problem is also another fantastic value add.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's wonderful. And thank you for sharing those specific examples, Nina. That helps definitely shed light into, what exactly is happening.
Yeah.
Have you seen anything change in how maybe this for both of you, and how the planning and prioritization process has also changed now, and what data sets are being looked for prioritization. I love that example of closing the loop with customers and that's a fantastic way to build close relationships. We're also beginning to see this trend more and more often of hey, who requested this feature from any channel in the last 6 months? We fixed this problem, just letting you know. I think that's a great way to build even stronger relations with customers. But in terms of the respect for feedback, have you seen that evolving over time, and how do you see its importance to grow over time as your business scale in what is prioritized made? I'm intentionally leaving it a little ambiguous just to invite some discussion here, but would love to hear some thoughts. Adina, maybe starting with you, and then I would love to invite Dina in.
Sure. So one of the things I think we're very lucky at the browser company. User feedback, member feedback has always been important to the leadership. So we always prioritize sprints around what members are asking for, having problems with. We definitely like to let the design team also build things that are net new, that have never been asked for or whatever else. But a huge part of what we work on is what are people confused about? How can we make the app more accessible? All of that. And that completely takes into account user data and user feedback. So I would say having leadership respect and acknowledge that member feedback is important. You cannot have a replacement for that, and necessarily, even if you show them the facts, I think you need to have a leadership and a design team that really does want to listen to users. I will say though, I think having data often gives you a seat at the table sometimes when you might otherwise not. So in cases where there are ties about the importance of something, I think that data and objectivity plays a really vital role, and coming equipped with that in conversations with designers or letting them see it you go see what's up. I think is really a good way to reprioritize and change the conversation.
I especially for when you have to break ties. I think that does happen from time to time. So I think in those situations, data can definitely help be tiebreakers. Hey, has the evidence of all customer pain? Dina, anything you want to say to that? Any comments to add to that?
No, I was just gonna actually the breaking ties thing was my example too. And interestingly, also we call our users members also. So much in common. So yeah, I think no, similarly, I think that thing of being able to bring the quantitative aspect to qualitative data gives it extra weight gives the data itself, the feedback data, its own little seat at the table, right? Because you can't ignore it. You know, it also kind of goes up against opinion. Oftentimes, you know, opinions are based on kind of folklore. I used to have this idea of kind of zombie statistics. Where did this guy come from? And why won't this fake number die? So yeah, I think, you know, being able to, like, you know, take this this data set, which previously was kind of maybe a bit fuzzy, you know, put it into a system, like systematize it. Yeah, that's definitely part of part of the benefit we've seen.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think systematizing fuzziness. Systematizing fuzziness. I'm going with the tagline for Enterpret going forward. So, yeah, Adina, please go on.
One of the things that I think is also really important is that we keep talking about Enterpret as like objectifying and putting this quantitative metric on a qualitative thing. But I also really love how Enterpret, or any system anyone would use for this, doesn't get rid of the qualitative part, because that's where the gold actually is. So you might see a big graph of people complaining about split view over time, which is one of our features. But being actually able to click into that and say, give me 10 people and what do they actually say, also really is huge for visibility. The design team and the CEO of the company can now actually viscerally feel it instead of just the number. So I think if anyone's data can be dangerous too, because you don't want to take it out of context. You also want to treat people as humans. You want to make sure you understand it in relation to everything else going on. So you want to make sure that that's added to the picture. And I think equipping leadership or anybody you're working with both the quantitative and the qualitative, like Dina said earlier, is like better. The whole is better than the sum of the parts kind of thing.
Yeah. The chart is like the hook. But no, I agree with you about that kind of emotion, the emotional visceral reaction you can get when you're like, yeah, it's a chart of these things, and this is how those people feel. And you know, you have that kind of thread running through it. That's why really, fantastic.
Yeah, I think that is such an exceptional point. I think like the point of like customer feedback analytics and charts is like to point you to reading the right feedback, but just getting to the right list of like feedback, but nothing can replace the raw emotion of like reading someone using your product and just describing a human being telling you exactly how they feel. I think that hits so much harder than any graph or any data point can hit you, right? Just like nothing can replace that. Absolutely. Wonderful. Matt, this has been absolutely amazing.
On top of that,
please.
One thing on that, because actually I think just on that kind of thread running through, because I was delighted when I saw this week, and our CRM team actually shared a deck round, and there was some screenshots from Enterpret in their deck. And so I was thinking like, oh, this is great, because that is becoming, you know, this data that comes out of CS, goes into product, goes into design, and it's landed in the growth team. I think that's a sign, you know, that you've made something that everyone can kind of gather around.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's wonderful. Thank you, Shanti. I think customer feedback can benefit every single team at the company. I think it's like, and it's good. I think we also love it when it sort of goes like viral from like team to team, and obviously starts with like people who are at the tip of the spear, which always like ends up being people, you know, who view it as like a data set and are feeling the pain, like Adina was feeling at the project company, like, hey, I just need something better to do this. But like once they have this in their armory and they start sharing, like then others will say, oh, I think this is how we should do it going forward, since it's 2023 and, you know, we shouldn't be manually tagging feedback maybe anymore. Wonderful. I would love to bring some audience questions in. So I think if we have, you know, any questions from the audience members, we can have them on in. And then, and I can read them out, and would love to get people's thoughts. The first question from the audience is, how do you balance customer feedback with internal goals and objectives? I think that's a fantastic question. Oh man, the trade-offs. Adina, maybe starting with you, and love to bring Dina in. Like, how do you think about this question? Any response to this?
That is a really difficult question. We right now try to evaluate our company priorities and objectives. Right now, we do it every 6 weeks, such that there's almost, which is frequent. And so, we have, you know, yearly goals, of course, but every 6 weeks, we choose the projects that we're going to work on, and we make deliberate, do we want to go for this customer problem, or do we want to build this new thing that customers don't even know about yet? And I think it's actually a really healthy tension. I think our members expect us to build new things. They also expect us to fix things that are broken that are already there. And so I think it's actually really healthy to reevaluate every time. Okay, we're choosing not to go with user feedback and to impress them in other ways and wow them with our new features. So I would say every 6 weeks it's a conversation, and everybody comes to the table, new ideas, customer feedback, the membership team, engineering goals, goals we have for the end of the year. All of it kind of gets a seat at the table, and we just hash it out in conversation. I know that's not really a very helpful thing to say, but I would say the frequency that we're checking ourselves, are we building something useful, and are we prioritizing the right thing, is actually what guides us to prioritize the right things. I don't know if Dina has a better
really
answer.
impressive.
Maybe I can. Oh, okay.
No, I think 6 weeks is like a really rapid rate of iteration. That, I mean, maybe that is also one of the drivers of the hyper growth. But that's wonderful to see that this discussion realigned happens every 6 weeks. Dina, I feel like anything you want to add, like how what does the healthy tension look like at Feel for solving customer pain, but also have like bigger objectives and bigger projects that are maybe multi-month.
Can't quite get my head around the 6-week thing. Taking that one back with me. So I'd say like not dissimilar to Adina's points, but we for us, all of our kind of internal goals and objectives are based on outcomes which are focused on a user goal, which is to make connections. So for us, any suggestions or feedback that comes in that we know will help users make more connections, it's a means to an end. So to that extent, it just comes to prioritizing which one. When it comes to doing that prioritization, actually underpinning all of our goal setting, we kind of work around this idea of the constellation of metrics, where we kind of map all the inputs and outputs that go through the business. And to that extent, we can actually map user feedback to each of those input metrics to understand where it's going to have a downstream impact on some bigger output metric, which will therefore help us achieve a goal or objectives. So I know I've gone like full core data on you again here, but I think it is that case of like, being able to like take your traditional way, or maybe slightly progressive way of like doing metrics, and wrap the customer feedback around it, to help drive based on that customer impact.
That's really insightful. I love that framing. Thank you for sharing, Dina. All right, next question from the audience. What all channels are important for listening to the voice of the customer? I think I'm interested in this one. Dina, maybe starting with you, like what I feel like, how do you think about what all channels are important?
I would take anything. and again, it comes down to that. The respect of people taking the effort to try and speak to us, right? At the moment we are getting tons of value from our CS tool, which we're using Intercom at the moment. People that take the time to send us a bug report, send us a complaint, send us some positive feedback. It all comes in. We're also getting a lot of value, as I mentioned, from the CSAT survey, which we're getting out via our CRM tooling. So obviously that's with people that are already existing, that are currently using the app. App reviews, of course, are super informative. Each of these, I think it's important to consider, and this is why I really like Enterpret, that you can synthesize these things in one place. The mindset of someone that's sending a complaint through Intercom is obviously quite different than someone that's been prompted to give feedback via CSAT, than someone that's taken the effort to put a review in the App Store. So you're catching members at all different points of their journey, all different feelings towards us. So I think as many channels as we could possibly get is good, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, and Adina, for the browser company, I know the mobile app is highly requested on the roadmap. So, but what all are the current channels of like feedback that the browser company cares about?
A mobile app is coming very soon, and I would say we use Interpret, Intercom. We use Interpret too, but Intercom is a big one. We bug report, feedback, same thing. People can report through there. We also use Twitter heavily, so people share. A lot of our early adopter users are on Twitter, so we respond to people on Twitter. We try to kind of get a sentiment check from people on Twitter. What are people generally positive or negative? We also somewhat frequently, just hop on a call, watch people go through our onboarding process, interject, on day 3, okay, what's confusing right now? It's been 3 days. And you get a really good sense of how people are using the product. And then I think underutilized sometimes is just everyone at our team is a user of a browser. So talking to our, teammates between discussions between teammates, actually, you start to say, yeah, that is really annoying about Arc. We should fix that. And so that's another way we relate to what it's like to be a user, in addition to just being a builder of the product.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. That's really insightful. Yeah. All right. One more question. Let's do one more question. Oh, wow. Great question from the audience. We have a lot of recency bias on user feedback. How do you mitigate it? I think this is going to be an interesting one. Dina, maybe we'll start with you, and then we'll bring Adina on this.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is why, it's important to kind of have a balance of different data types, right? One recent complaint shouldn't outweigh 10 from last week on the same theme.
Right.
And this is kind of where, your kind of core product management skills come in, weighing up on the trade-offs. Being able to say, okay, well, that one complaint that's come in yesterday, it's going to cost us X amount, and it's a lot more than last. How do you balance that out? And when I say cost, it's not, cost in terms of financials. It could be cost in terms of the outcome that I mentioned. We're going to make people lose connections. People going to have whatever issue. But being able to, again, I've used the word synthesize a lot, but it's like my go-to word for Enterpret. But it's synthesize like that qualitative data of those important outcome metrics with the feedback itself. So yeah, I think both it's definitely worth keeping in mind. The same as, not listening to like the loudest person in the room. You don't have to only listen to the most recent thing that's come into. However, it can be great early warning systems. So I wouldn't just discount, recency as only bias, because it can be a very, very rapid way of getting ahead of problems.
Right. Yeah, that's an excellent point as well. Yeah. Adina, like at the browser company, how do you think about the recency bias? It's actually a very hard thing to overcome. So, but I do want, like, especially if it's on Twitter, so it becomes like publicly visible on the entire internet. So then, how do you think about that?
So I really want to +1 to what Dina said about, is it an early warning or is it just one thing someone said randomly? So we always do a quick gut check, but we heavily involve the opinion of the people on the membership team, the people who have read, all the feedback we've gotten that week. Is this an anomaly, or is this new? Is this what we've heard? Another thing, so I would say getting the opinions of the people who are most informed about what users are saying every day, I think is really important. And so I would highly advise anybody who's not, in frequent contact with the customer support team should be in frequent contact if they're actually, so intuition there is really important. I would also say that we started implementing something called membership sit-ins, where for an hour, someone on the team sits with the customer support rep and does an hour of answering questions, fixing bugs, doing feedback.
That's awesome.
And yes, you are getting an hour. Yes, it's a really, I think it's going well, but you are just getting an hour. It's a sample size, but it starts to give everybody some visibility into the amount of feedback, the amount of bugs, the variety. So it kind of helps, it depressurizes a single tweet, I guess, when you kind of see it in the context for a little bit, even if it's just once a quarter, getting a sense of what the membership team actually sees every day.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think that's an excellent way of like democratizing feedback intuition across the entire company as well. If like they just get to do it on some regular cadence. And I love the term you said, depressurizing the one tweet which gets a lot of likes and comments. Great. I think we can do one more. I think we do one more question from the audience. We have like 2 minutes. So is there one more question we can take? Adina, an ardent Arc user, Arc collects feedback very intelligently. Can you share what has worked well and not worked well in your feedback collection approach? So this is a slightly different thing. Adina, this is specifically for you. Anything you want to share?
What has worked and what hasn't worked? Let's see. What's worked is remembering that we're human, and the people who are at the end of the line are human too. And I think that sounds obvious, but there's this kind of sometimes there's this rush when you're in customer support or when you have the quantity of feedback that we have to just get through as many as possible and take shortcuts, like respond to. We are so lucky to get the feedback that we get. So kind of taking a moment to be grateful first. You know, you look at the mountain of feedback and you're like, there's probably some gem in here that would make the product better for everybody. So what's worked is making sure you're treating, having a human relationship even through the screen, I think has worked really well. What hasn't worked well, I would say there's a lot. We want to get better at our tooling, I guess. Sometimes people write in about feedback and we're like, that's definitely a bug. So we need ways to kind of make sure feedback is hooked into kind of crash data, metadata, all of that. And I would say one feature request I have for Enterpret is to more easily, quickly send an email to all the people who've had a problem. So right now I have to export all that data and then import it and upload it into Intercom. And so making that feedback loop even automatic, like I can just say something like, we launched, and then it just sends an email saying thank you. That like feedback loop that is fairly manual at this point, where I have to upload and email everybody. So. But it's been very rewarding. So thank you for asking. And thank you for being a member.
Yeah, wonderful. And Adina, thank you for always pushing us to help get one more workload through Enterpret. So that's great. That's why I'm so grateful to have such progressive customers as like Field in the browser company. Great. We're at 45 minutes in now. So we've done like 15 of Q&A. So I think we've come at our end of our time. I just want to take a moment to thank Dina and Adina. Dina is joining us from Dubai, which is extremely late night. Adina is joining us from London, and it's almost like it's post-work hours coming close to that. So thank you both for taking time out of your busy work days to spend 45 minutes with us and for this like live discussion. I'm personally very grateful that I get to learn from both of you to build Enterpret, but also that you are such progressive champions of customer feedback, and that the fact that, again, both of you call your customers as members is a great example of that. So thank you both for taking the time, and yeah, hopefully everyone got value from the discussion, and I wish all of you a lovely rest of the day.
Thank you. Thanks, Farhan.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks, Aaron.